Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Care Brunder and Associates had an office in a medium-sized brick and stone building in a very upscale area of downtown, surrounded by trendy cafes and microbreweries. The spacious lobby was brightly lit by natural light streaming through large windows and reflecting off the abundance of chrome and white marble in the minimalist interior. The slightly sterile impression was somewhat softened by a few plants and small artificial waterfalls built into the marble walls. Several people sat on chairs, waiting. The women were fashionably dressed, and the men, though mostly in casual clothes, made me feel like I looked too casual in my jeans and shirt. I was now grateful for choosing them instead of a t-shirt. To be honest, I wondered how we could even afford this place. I could see that Lisa was impressed as she took in her surroundings. Finally, her gaze settled on me, and she smiled faintly before taking my hand. We walked up to the front desk, where a young, attractive woman with brown hair, pulled back into a tight ponytail and wearing a light cream sweater, smiled warmly and greeted us. Lisa glanced at me, urging me to act. "John and Lisa," I said, "we have an appointment at 2:30. The administrator, still smiling, handed me a tablet with a document and a pen. "Please sit down and fill this out," she said. "They'll call you when we're ready." We sat down on a couple of chairs away from the main waiting area, and I quickly flipped through the paperwork. At the top was a form asking for our contact information, and a business card was attached to the tablet. Dr. K. Brunder, Ph.D., family consultant, phone number, email, and website. Underneath was a non-disclosure agreement. This didn't surprise me, since it had been mentioned in a conversation with my friend Dan, who had recommended this place. I had spoken with Dan about the need for counseling at Lisa's urging. Dan and his wife, Dolores, Lisa's friend, had experienced a similar crisis in their marriage. It had almost ruined their relationship, but now they looked like newlyweds. It was impressive how affectionate they were with each other after years of marriage and difficulties. Dan credited Care Brunder and Associates entirely and made it clear that he thought Lisa and I should try it before going our separate ways. I was skeptical, and Dan sensed it. "I know how you feel. I felt the same way. Dolores and I were on the verge of divorce," he said decisively. "I'd had enough. Dolores talked me into trying therapy, and I agreed, frankly, because I thought it would shut her up, and I could say I'd done everything to save the marriage before leaving her completely. But man, it worked. It wasn't easy, but here we are." I was still undecided. "Look, I don't know if this will work for you. Maybe it's not for everyone, and Lord knows it's not an easy path. To put it mildly, it's unusual. It's like being taken apart piece by piece and then put back together. But look at us now. I'm happier than I've ever been. Dolores and I are madly in love, and the intim is just amazing." "It's easy to believe," I remarked. "You're like teenagers with each other." "No," he said, looking me straight in the eye, much more passionately. "No joke. Much hotter. Crap. So, what does this include?" I asked. "Intim or therapy?" He answered, laughing. "Both." I laughed in response. "I can't talk about the therapy. We signed a non-disclosure agreement." "And about the night?" "I promised Dolores not to tell anyone," he said with a smile. Now, I had that same non-disclosure agreement in front of me. I didn't know how common this was in family therapy because I'd never seen a counselor before, but I guessed it might be a smart move to protect unique practices. The document seemed standard. My pen hovered over the dotted line as I wondered about Dan's description of the therapy as unusual. But, damn it, if I didn't like it, I could always leave. I signed and handed the document to Lisa. She signed it without even reading it and returned it to me. Then she hugged me and pulled her body closer. "Thank you for that, gentlemen," she said. She laid her head on my shoulder. My body tensed slightly, involuntarily, with irritation. I repented and hugged her. I looked at her, inhaling the coconut scent of her long, silky hair. Damn, if she weren't so pretty, I would have filed for divorce a long time ago. I loved her. It was true. But even love has its limits. Those limits, however, stretch a little further when a woman has a body like hers. We waited a little longer. I looked around at the others who were sitting and waiting. Some of the people in the room were clearly in pairs, and I wondered how many of them were here for the same reason as us. Many looked tense, and most seemed to be around our age, mid-20s to 30s. I guess that was probably the case. The wives were quite attractive. Had they sinned against their husbands? What had they done? To distract myself, I scrolled through the document on my tablet again. There was no section for insurance information. Lisa, how can we afford this? I asked. Don't worry. I'll arrange everything, okay? We need this, and I'll pay for it. Lisa always took care of the accounts. I've never had a good head for finances. I write advertising text for a living, and just thinking about financial forms gives me a stress headache. I'll let the topic drop. At that moment, a young woman approached us. John and Lisa? She asked affably. I'm Dr. Brunder's assistant, Julian. Follow me, she said, her words carrying a slight French accent. She took the clipboard from us and checked our signatures on the non-disclosure agreement. Dr. Brunder is waiting for you. We were led down a corridor to a door. Julian knocked on it and opened it slightly. Come in, said a woman's voice. Julian opened the door completely and stepped aside, smiling welcomingly and waiting for us to enter the office. She closed the door behind us. A tall blonde approached us from her desk. Her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, but a few strands fell beautifully across her very attractive face. She was probably about 40. Her business trousers and a black, tight sweater under a white jacket emphasized her athletic figure and proportional, well-shaped breasts, between which hung an elegant pendant on a thin gold chain. John, she said, shaking my hand and smiling. Lisa, I'm Dr. Brande. Please have a seat. She sat down at her desk again as we settled into two comfortable chairs placed slightly to the side of her desk. Her office was spacious, with large windows hidden by thin white curtains that allowed sunlight to filter in gently while keeping the room private. Modern paintings adorned the walls, but there were no bookshelves, which I had expected based on depictions in films and TV shows about such offices. A few plants and small sculptures completed the decor. Her large mahogany desk was almost empty, save for a closed laptop, a yellow notepad lying blank, and an expensive silver pen resting beside it. We sat in silence for a few seconds, watching her as she watched us. Water? She asked. Yes, please, answered Lisa. Brunder's gaze turned to me. My mouth felt dry, and I nodded. There was a cooler against the wall next to her desk, and as she poured water into two glasses, she continued speaking. Sometimes couples come here to improve their relationship without experiencing any particular difficulties, just as a music lover might take lessons to improve their performance and achieve excellence. However, most often, they come because of a specific problem, a crisis, or a need to correct the situation. She handed us our glasses of water and returned to her seat. Both approaches are valid. I can help in any way. However, when there is a crisis, it is most effective to start with that by addressing the crisis and its cause. So, I have to ask, are we here for improvement or restoration? Lisa and I looked at each other. I knew she wanted me to answer. For recovery, I said. Brunda nodded. I waited for her to continue, but she remained silent, watching us with an unreadable expression. I decided to endure the silence, but as it grew more intense, I couldn't stand it. I've never done this before, I said, feeling foolish. At that moment, Brunder smiled sympathetically, but still remained silent. Her quiet demeanor began to irritate me. It felt like a game of nerves, a demonstration of confidence. And it worked. I started thinking about what to say next. Finally, she spoke. Would it be easier for you if I try to guess? I tried to detect any hint of sarcasm or irritation in her tone, but she spoke completely earnestly. Dr. Brunder did not waste time with idle chatter. Come on, try it, I said, attempting to lighten the mood as if it were some kind of fun test. If I guess, don't be offended if I'm wrong, she said. I nodded. Her eyes stayed fixed on mine, studying me and completely ignoring Lisa. Treason, she said with the same impassive expression. Involuntarily, I looked away. The word hit me with enormous force. When I returned my gaze to her, she was nodding slightly. Who? She asked, still looking at me. I waited for Lisa to answer, but she remained silent. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her staring at the floor. Should I guess again? Brunda asked. I nodded. Her eyes finally turned to Lisa, who looked up at her sadly. Lisa nodded slightly. "Okay," said Dr. Brunder. "So, let's begin." She leaned back in her chair, getting comfortable. As she spoke, she alternated her gaze between me and Lisa. To make progress, it's important to avoid misunderstandings and confusion. This means we cannot take anything for granted or make assumptions. I may ask questions that seem obvious to you, but I don't know you. Even if I did, I shouldn't make assumptions. Even people who have known each other for years often don't truly know each other. At these words, she cast a significant glance at us. She was right. I began to realize how little I truly knew Lisa, despite all our years together. "So, let's confirm or deny some assumptions," she said, pausing as we both nodded. "Jean, are you very upset by Lisa's betrayal?" From the moment I found out Lisa was cheating on me, rage had boiled inside me, sometimes suppressed, hidden, and sometimes obvious. This question brought it to the surface. "Yes," I said, giving Dr. Brunder a hostile look. "This makes me very upset." Brunder looked at me calmly, showing no emotion. It was impossible to break her composure. "Sorry," I said after a moment. "Yes, it upsets me." Brunder nodded. "Is it difficult for you to forgive her?" I nodded. "Is it difficult for you to imagine trusting her again?" Another nod. "That's natural," she said. She turned her gaze to Lisa. "Was it a man?" "Yes," answered Lisa, a little surprised. "One man?" "Yes," Lisa replied, firmly nodding. "Was it one time or several?" Lisa hesitated for a moment, then answered with her head down. "A couple of times," she said quietly, wiping away tears. "How much is a couple?" 3 or 4 times, Lisa said softly. Bruna leaned back and studied her for a moment. Then she picked up her pen and began to speak again, examining it carefully. "Very often, when one partner cheats on the other, they try to minimize the affair as much as possible. This is natural and is caused not only by fear of consequences or shame, but also by compassion for the other partner, a desire not to hurt them more than they already have. This instinct is tempting, especially because the betrayed partner often has no other way to uncover the full truth. But the real problem with infidelity is the destruction of trust in the relationship. Rebuilding trust is extremely difficult. It requires an enormous amount of honesty. Overcoming fear and shame is essential to achieve this honesty. It's not easy, I understand that, but this is the main challenge in recovering from such a crisis in marriage. She paused, looking at both of us. Are you both willing to overcome fear and shame if it is necessary to restore your marriage? We both nodded. Okay, she said, nodding as well. She turned to Lisa. When we lie, we feel trapped. We fear even worse consequences if we correct that lie. But if we want to restore trust, Lisa began to cry harder. Lisa raised her head. Are you ready to do whatever it takes to restore John's trust in your marriage? Lisa nodded, sobbing. Was it just one man? Dr. Brunder asked. Yes, Lisa sobbed. Brunder waited a moment for Lisa to calm down. And how many night acts did you have with this man? Lisa continued to sob. I felt myself growing indifferent as I waited for her answer. Finally, Lisa took a deep breath and blurted out, Less than 20, I think. It felt like a punch to the stomach. My vision narrowed, the world darkened around the edges, and my heart pounded in my chest. I vaguely heard Bruna say, Okay, softly. Then there was a long silence while Lisa tried to calm down. Brunner took some notes as we waited. She reached for me, but the distance between our chairs was too great, and she only managed to touch the fabric of my sleeve. I didn't even look at her. When her sobs had subsided, Brunder spoke again. I assume you've already apologized for the affair, Lisa. No more apologies are needed, even if new details emerge. Now, we must move on. Overcoming guilt and accusations will be difficult for both of you. But if we keep revisiting the narrative of who's to blame and how much, it will distract us from the path to healing and restoration. If you want to return to being a happy, functional couple, you can't constantly play the roles of sinner and victim. Okay? Lisa looked at me. I nodded. Then she nodded too. Fine. Is the affair over? Brunder asked. Lisa nodded vigorously. Okay, Brunder said, turning to me. Jean, Do I understand correctly that you discovered the betrayal yourself? Or did Lisa tell you about it? I figured it out myself, I said. How? Will you tell me this story? I sighed heavily. What's the difference? She looked at me again with her unreadable gaze, waiting a moment before answering. You won't always understand why I say or ask something, John. If you want this to work, you'll have to trust that I know what I'm doing. I get results. I can help restore your marriage, but we shouldn't waste time debating methods. I sighed again. At first, it was just intuition. About a year ago, I think. You just feel it, you know? She nodded. That made me pay more attention to her schedule and behavior. She stayed late at work, or went to the gym more often, or had girls' nights. I tried to push it aside, but I couldn't. One night, she came back from an evening out with her friends, and I wanted to make love to her. We were in bed. She'd had several glasses of wine. We kissed a little, and I wanted to, go downstairs. But she stopped me. She told me to just have a night with her. It felt strange recounting such an intimate story in this unfamiliar office, but Brunder's expression made it clear she was used to such revelations. She nodded. Go on, she said. Well, that made me suspicious. Understand, a woman rarely refuses such pleasure. She nodded evenly. I couldn't help but have a fleeting vision of Brunder without pants or underwear sitting on her desk. I took a sip of water, hoping she couldn't read my mind. I felt a flicker of arousal and squirmed in my seat. Why do you think she refused? She asked. I think you know why, I replied. Perhaps, she said, but we need to get used to talking to each other directly. I fidgeted in my chair again. I thought there might be remains of another man. Brunda nodded. Let's avoid using language that distances us from the topic. You thought there were remnants of another man in her, correct? I nodded. What did you do? She asked directly. I lay down on top of her. We hadn't intim. She sensed my hesitation and nodded. I looked at Brunder's face for a reaction, but it remained impenetrable as she studied me. Did you have a night with her again after that? Yes. She nodded. Even though you couldn't be sure whether there were remnants of another man in her? I shrugged. I was excited. She nodded thoughtfully. Did you finish quickly? I shrugged again. What do you mean by quickly? Faster than usual. Who cares? She waited silently. That's right, I said. We shouldn't waste time discussing methods. That's right, she echoed. Probably, I admitted. Was it good intim? Unusually strong, I guess. Do you think so? Yes. It was unusually strong, and satisfying. Do you think so? No, I corrected myself. Yes. Have you discussed this since then? She asked, looking at both of us. Lisa lowered her head. No, I said. She turned her gaze to Lisa. Do you remember that moment, Lisa? Lisa nodded without raising her head. And John was right. Had you tried to hide the remnants of your lover? My brain exploded with jealousy. Loa. My mind latched onto that word. My wife's lover. The wound felt fresh all over again. New tears flowed down Lisa's cheeks as she nodded, still not raising her head. Rage began to rise within me. A little girl of easy virtue, I thought angrily. I turned away. But strangely, discussing these details in the presence of this stranger, a beautiful woman, had the peculiar effect of arousing me again. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. I'm sorry, Lisa sobbed, looking at me with large, tear-stained eyes full of pleading. No more apologies, Brunder reminded her sternly. Then she turned back to me. Go on, she demanded. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. After that, I bought a GPS tracker for her car. A week later, I caught her when she went to an unfamiliar address, even though she said she was going to a friend's house. It was the wrong house. I went there by bicycle. It was already quite dark, and the house was in a secluded place. There was a lot of land around it, so I took a chance and snuck up. I couldn't see or hear anything at first. I waited for a long time. Then the light came on upstairs. I paused, bitterness creeping into my voice. I think they liked looking at each other. Try to avoid an accusatory tone, Brunder said softly. I glanced at her. Her face was still calm and sympathetic. I shrugged, and then I heard them. I said as calmly as I could manage. The sounds of love, you mean? The sounds of intim. The sounds of another man with my wife. I tried to maintain composure, holding back the bitterness. I didn't want to say the sounds of my wife enjoying good intim. but that's what I'd heard. Brenda nodded. That was a big blow, she said. I nodded. What did you do? I hesitated a bit, then left. What was I supposed to do? Knock on the door? Let them have each other? Brenda studied me. Is that all? Nothing more? I sighed. I made a recording. An audio recording on my phone. I thought it might help with a divorce, but it turns out those things don't really matter. Brenda nodded. Do you still have it? I felt Lisa's eyes on me. Yes. Brenda looked at Lisa. Have you heard it? Lisa shook her head, her eyes wide. Brenda turned back to me. Do you have it with you? I nodded. She held my gaze. You're kidding, I said. We need to put everything on the table, she replied. Lisa must understand the burden you're carrying. I sat in silence for a long time. Okay, I finally said. I took my phone out of my pocket, unlocked it, and found the file. I looked at Lisa, who seemed utterly crushed. I turned up the volume and pressed play. From the phone speakers came faint but distinct sounds of a woman being pleasured. Lisa's high-pitched, frantic screams. Something unintelligible that my jealous mind interpreted as "take me harder." Then the rhythmic sound of the bed hitting the wall. I felt myself tense up again and glanced at Brenda, searching for her reaction. Was she enjoying this? I thought I noticed signs of arousal on her face. I crossed my legs to hide my own discomfort. Next to me, Lisa's face was buried in her hands. Stop it, she begged. I looked at Brenda. She nodded, and I paused the recording. After a few seconds, she asked, how long is the recording? 38 minutes, I said. All of it? I nodded. Did you stay and listen until they finished? I stayed to gather evidence until they finished. Yes. Then I went home. We sat in silence for a long time. Brenda occasionally glanced at us, her expression thoughtful, as though she was letting us process. How many times have you listened to this recording? She finally asked me. What? Do you often listen to it? No, I said indignantly. What's the point? I already know what's on it. After I made it, I just checked how well it was recorded, and that's it. I haven't listened to it again. It was a lie, but I saw no reason to admit the truth. This was supposed to be Lisa's humiliation, not mine. But Brenda's cold blue eyes seemed to see right through me. Have you ever satisfied yourself while listening to it? What? No, I answered firmly. My cheeks burned, and I raised a glass of water to my face to hide my expression. I was angry at my own shame. But what if I had satisfied myself a couple of times with that recording? In fact, I could describe the entire thing in detail. No word spoken or screamed by her was intelligible, but I could tell when she was enjoying herself. The first time happened early at the 6th minute, but there were more intense moments later. At the 15th, the 21st, and especially at the 36th minute, when her sounds were accompanied by the loud. Lisa and I had gone through some real hateful in-him therapy after I confronted her. She was so remorseful and terrified that I would leave her that she let me have a night with her anytime I wanted. But in my head, during those acts, the recording would replay itself as if on a loop. Even if I didn't want to think about it, I couldn't forget it. Although I hadn't heard him on the recording, I imagined this man with her. That was the real pain. I'd never been able to make her scream like she did in that recording. Those sounds haunted me, echoing endlessly in my mind. But I wasn't about to tell Lisa or Brenda about that. No, irapata firmly. Brenda studied me carefully, but didn't press further. What did you do after you finished collecting evidence? She asked with a faint hint of mockery. I ignored the irony, seeing it as a little revenge for my lie. Ultimately, I wanted to move on. I interrogated her when she came home. She lied, denied everything, until she realized she'd been caught. Then she confessed and begged for forgiveness. But, as we now know, she didn't tell the whole truth. She lied about how many times they had intim. Calm down, Brenda said softly. You need to stop these accusations, John. I know it's hard, but you'd most likely do the same in her place. I would never cheat, I snapped. Never? She asked again. I shook my head. She seemed to accept my answer. It was the truth. Okay, she said, straightening and turning to Lisa. Are you okay? Lisa wiped her eyes and nodded. We're making progress, even if it doesn't seem that way to you. Healing is painful. Do you understand? She waited for Lisa to nod before continuing. Lisa, I want you to tell us how it all started. Lisa sighed heavily and nodded. What does John know about all this? That's it, Lisa answered. Then she clarified, probably everything now, meaning the new revelation about the number of times they'd had an intimate. This is a man I worked with sometimes. Mark. He's a client of our office. I'm an accountant, and my job occasionally involves collaborating with him on company affairs. One evening, we went out for drinks with colleagues, and he offered me a ride home. We kissed, but didn't have a night. Later, it developed into something more, and we went to his house occasionally. I'm not like that. I was going through a hard time. My mother had just died, and I lost my footing. I went crazy. I see, Brenda said, leaning back in her chair. Now, let's hear how this connection began. Lisa looked confused. But I just told you everything. Brenda gave her a patient smile. Lisa, you said John knows everything? Lisa nodded. Brenda turned to me. John, do you feel like you know everything? I shook my head. What I didn't know felt like a bottomless abyss filled with jealous fantasies. Lisa shook her head too. No, she said firmly. I told you everything. Brenda leaned forward, placing her hands on the table. She looked at Lisa, then back at me. John, describe for me, if you can, any of Lisa's intimate acts with this man. I looked at Lisa, whose eyes widened in alarm. I shrugged. I can't. Lisa didn't tell me any details. Right, Brenda said. If I asked you to describe how you imagine them together, what positions they used, what this man did to Lisa, and what she did to him, how long would it take? I swallowed hard. It would take a long time, I admitted. It's not unusual for a man to think the worst when he imagines such things. And he thinks about it often. Brenda smiled at me sympathetically. The worst. And often, she repeated. Then she looked at Lisa. That's what John imagines if he doesn't know the details. It's standing between you now and your marriage. Do you want him to stop? To stop torturing himself? Lisa nodded. Yes, of course. It doesn't help when these things are left unsaid. And it's not enough to tell him what didn't happen. He will continue to imagine. The only way to stop this is to tell him, in detail, what you and Mark did together. Everything you did in bed or anywhere else and how it made you feel. This is the only way to heal. Can you do it? Both of you? She looked at both of us in turn. Lisa waited for my response. I nodded, feeling a mix of anger, shame, and, disturbingly, arousal. Why was I so damn horny? Lisa swallowed hard, studying me, then nodded at Brenda. Brenda smiled. Then let's begin. Lisa took a deep breath before speaking. Okay, she said quietly. Our first encounter, some people from work were drinking right after work, at the bar on the top floor of our building. Mark was there with us. We'd always flirted a little. He's very attractive, but it was innocent. Can you describe Mark? Brenda asked. He's 30. Tall, athletic build, dark hair, good haircut. Handsome. Go on. After a couple of drinks, we all started dancing. Mark dances very well, confidently, with a good sense of rhythm. My colleague Margaret left the dance floor, and I thought it would be wise to follow her. I was afraid I had been looking at Mark too much. I didn't want people to notice and start making jokes or gossiping. Mark approached me just as I was about to leave and asked me to stay for another dance. I told him it was time for me to go home. He offered to give me a ride. I'd had a little too much to drink, but I just smiled and refused, saying that people might talk. He insisted, saying I shouldn't drive and suggesting I could claim that John was picking me up. We could leave separately, so no one would suspect anything. I laughed nervously and told him he was bad. Did you agree to his plan? Brenda asked. Lisa thought for a moment. No, not really. I just smiled and didn't say anything. When we went back to the table, Mark announced he was leaving. He overruled all objections, said goodbye, and left. I sat with my glass, pretending to listen to the conversation, but I couldn't concentrate. I kept wondering if he was waiting for me. Then I got a message from John asking when I'd be home. I replied that I was already leaving. For some reason, I told everyone that John was coming to pick me up. I don't even know why. I didn't think about it. I said goodbye and left. My heart was pounding. I wasn't sure if it was because I had lied about John picking me up or something else. When I stepped out of the bar, I didn't see Mark in the hallway. It seemed he wasn't waiting for me. And how did that make you feel? Brenda asked. A little stupid. Anything else? Brenda prompted, waiting patiently. Lisa hesitated, then admitted I realized I was disappointed. I didn't plan on doing anything, but it felt like rejection, I guess. Brenda nodded. Go on. I was waiting for the elevator with a few people I didn't know. When the doors opened, there he was. He'd been riding up and down, waiting for me. I felt very pleased. It was flattering. I think I smiled, but I didn't want to show I noticed him. I just stepped into the elevator with the others. It was a little crowded, and I ended up standing in front of Mark. Then I felt him put his hand on my waist. How did that feel? Brenda asked. Lisa paused. Oh, nice. It felt nice. His hand was big, warm, strong. And then he slowly pulled me toward him. I could feel him. Was he excited? Lisa nodded, looking at the floor. Was he big? Brenda clarified. Lisa hesitated, then nodded again. Yes, very big, as far as I could tell. I fidgeted in my seat, my discomfort growing. My heart pounded harder than ever. Lisa sighed and nodded without looking at me. A lot. Yes, she whispered. What did you do? Brenda asked. Nothing. I just stood there, pretending nothing was happening. And how did you feel about it? Did it excite you? Lisa looked at her silently for a moment, then said quietly, yes, a little, I guess. But it's not my fault. I didn't do anything. Lisa, we're moving past the accusations. Remember? Brenda reminded her gently. Lisa nodded. Okay, she continued. He moved his hand a little higher, under my shirt, just above my waistband, touching my skin. It felt really good, but you still didn't do anything? No, I didn't. And if you've been alone in the elevator? Lisa hesitated. I don't know. I had a desire. She paused, covering her mouth with her hand as if shocked by her own words. Her eyes flickered to mine. My heart thundered in my chest, rage and desire warring within me. No apologies, Brenda reminded her firmly. Lisa nodded, lowering her hands to her knees and fiddling nervously with her fingers. She stared at the floor, her breathing heavier now. Was she upset or excited? She continued. The elevator finally stopped in the parking lot. Everyone else got out. Mark just said, I'm on A7 or something like that, indicating where his car was parked. I followed him. I felt his eyes on me the entire way. When we got to his car, the headlights flashed as he unlocked it remotely. I reached for the passenger door handle, but his hand covered mine to stop me. And? Brenda prompted. Lisa swallowed. He kissed me. And how was it? Lisa exhaled a trembling breath. It was good. Hot. Brenda clarified. Lisa nodded. I turned to him, wrapped my arms around his neck. I didn't even think. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to go home, but my body responded. And then he pressed me against the car, and we just kissed for a while. Then his hands started to wander over my clothes, my breasts, And your hands? I think they wandered too. I grabbed his fifth place, pulled him closer to me. I was enjoying it. And then his hand slipped under my skirt, touching me through my panties. Were you excited? Lisa hesitated, then nodded. Very, I guess. Yes. Ich glänzte hier. She was showing all the familiar signs of arousal. Her chest heaved, her lips looked swollen. He put his hand in my panties, and I lifted my legs slightly to give him access. God, I didn't recognize myself. I tried to make sure no one noticed us, but I couldn't concentrate. After a while, Lisa paused, covering her mouth again. Then she lowered her hands. I pushed him away, but then grabbed him by the shirt and pressed him against the car. I kissed him again, our tongues intertwining. Without even thinking, I unfastened his belt. As I lifted his shirt, I felt him. He was so huge. So this is what really happened during their first kiss, I thought, lying to myself. I wanted her so badly right then and there. My imagination spiraled. I pictured bending her over Brenda's desk, lifting her skirt, and having a night with her until she passed out, all while Brenda watched. Lisa finished her water, and Brenda poured us both another glass. The smell of her, the proximity of her toned body as she leaned over to pour, had an unexpectedly strong erotic effect on me. I wondered if Brenda herself was affected by the story. She remained professional, but I couldn't shake the suspicion that she, like Lisa, was slightly aroused. Thank you, I said, taking the glass of water. Brenda gave me a slight smile before sitting back down. Lisa took a sip of her water and continued. holding the glass in her hands. I pulled his briefs down further, Lisa said. I had to kneel to get them down to his ankles. She glanced at me briefly, then set her glass on the floor. I touched him carefully, feeling him tense at my touch. My lips were so close I knew he could feel my breath. Slowly, I moved my hands, watching his reactions. He couldn't hold back a quiet groan. I kept caressing him gently, taking my time, letting him feel every moment. His gaze stayed fixed on me as I teased him, and his voice grew hoarse. He called my name, unable to hold back. He ran his fingers through my hair as I continued. Lisa paused, her breathing slightly heavier. At that moment, I made my choice. I was completely immersed in that intimate moment, realizing how important it was for both of us. But then, she continued, he picked me up, kissed me briefly, and opened the back door of his sedan. He told me to lie down on the seat. I told him I couldn't sleep with him, that I was married. He said he just wanted to please me. In the moment, it didn't seem so scary, so I did what he asked. He lifted my skirt and slowly took off my panties. I ran my fingers through his hair and pulled him toward me. It was nice. Lisa fell silent. Brenda nodded and took a sip of water, keeping her gaze on Lisa. What happened next? Brenda asked. Lisa opened her mouth, but couldn't speak at first. She closed it again and stared at the carpet. His pants were still down, Lisa finally said, nodding. I think we both understand what happened next, Lisa, but you need to tell us, Brenda said calmly. Lisa sighed. He climbed on top of me. It was so pretty. I told him to have a night with me. What did you say, exactly? Just this, I said, take me. But he kept teasing me. I guess I kind of started begging for it. I said, please take me. He asked if I really wanted it and kept teasing me. I said yes. Then he made me say, please, again. And then he started. Lisa sighed heavily, her breathing ragged. It was obvious she was affected by the memory. He moved slowly at first. He was so huge. Lisa paused, taking a drink of water to steady herself. I glanced at Brenda, noticing her shift slightly in her seat. Her eyes accidentally revealed her own physical reaction to Lisa's confession, but she quickly regained her composure. Lisa continued, it was hot. He started going harder like crazy. The car was shaking back and forth. I'm sure it made a terrible noise, but I didn't care. She fell silent again, took another sip of water, and looked at me. She shrugged. I didn't intend for any of this to happen. What happened next? Well, we were both panting for a while. He was still inside me. Eventually, he said it was time to take me home. Should I take you home? Is that what he said? Yeah, something like, I guess it's time to take you home to your husband. How did he say that? Lisa hesitated. He was kind of laughing, not at me. It was just, the whole situation was strange and sudden. One moment we were just friends, and the next we'd had intim until we were exhausted. It was his way of saying, oh my God. Did you laugh too? I probably giggled nervously. And then he took you home? Lisa nodded. By that time, I had sobered up, so I drove my own car. Did you agree to meet again? Lisa nodded. And John didn't suspect anything when you got home? Lisa shook her head. It sounds like it was an incredibly satisfying, intimate encounter, Brenda said. Lisa looked at her and nodded. Am I right in thinking this was the most satisfying encounter of your life? Brenda asked, her tone even. Lisa held her gaze for a few moments before admitting, at that time, yes. Brenda nodded, then turned her attention to me. I'm guessing you're feeling very strong emotions right now, John. Can you tell us what you're feeling? My heart pounded. How do I feel? Well, Dr. Brenda, I think we can start with jealous rage, I said, trying to keep my anger in check. That's natural, Brenda said, nodding. What else? What else? You said to start with jealous rage. What else then? I took a deep breath. Betrayal. Humiliation. Brenda nodded again, studying me carefully. After a moment, she spoke. Did this story excite your intimacy? She asked calmly. What? I asked incredulously. Brenda said nothing, continuing to study me. I felt Lisa's gaze on me. No, I said. Brenda nodded. So, you weren't excited? She asked. I was looking for words. It looks like you're trying to hide your excitement. No. I refrained from looking at Lisa. Maybe it would be easier for you to write the answer, she suggested, holding a pen and paper toward me from the edge of her desk, inviting me to stand and take them. I couldn't do it. So I remained silent, and she put them back. Who cares? I tried. I've already said that we don't waste time discussing methodology, John. Lisa has been incredibly open and honest. We need that from both of you if we are to make progress. Listen, I said, it's not unusual to be turned on by a dirty story, even if that story is about your wife sleeping with another man. It's a simple, normal biological response to an erotic stimulus. That doesn't mean I'm glad my wife cheated on me. Everyone likes erotic stories, I emphasized. So, what turned you on? She insisted. It's not about me. Really. This is couples therapy, John. There are two people in a relationship. Okay. Yeah. A little horny. A little, or a lot. I said nothing. Brenda nodded. Thank you, John. She turned to Lisa and then addressed both of us. This has been wonderful progress for one session, but our time is almost up. I want to leave you with a little homework. Do you have any pressing matters after this meeting? Need to go to work? We shook our heads. Both of us had wisely taken the day off in case we weren't able to go to work after the session. Fine. When you leave this office, I want you not to talk to each other until you have a night. And do so as soon as possible. But don't talk, she emphasized, unless it's part of an intimate role play or something like that. We nodded. Very good. See you next week at this time. And remember, no blame, no shame, and no apology. She stood up and walked us to the door. I pulled my shirt out from under my trousers as discreetly as possible to cover my excitement, then stood up. I felt Lisa's gaze on me. No one commented, but Brenda pretended not to notice anything as she shook our hands and walked us to the exit. As we walked along the corridor, we met Julian, who was on her way to Brenda's office. Julian said a cheerful goodbye to us in a noticeable French accent, and I noticed how she appreciated the casual detail of my shirt, now covering my obvious arousal. Her eyes quickly dropped to the floor, and she couldn't hide a small smile as she walked past us. I didn't care. I was completely consumed by the burning need. At that moment, nothing else existed for me. I'd deal with the rest later. I just desperately needed to have a night with Lisa. Hard. I had never felt such a need before. Behind us, I heard Julian ask Brenda if she was ready for her next client. Quietly, Brenda replied, not right now. I need 10 to 15 minutes. Please apologize. Hearing this, Lisa tried to hide her small smile. I grabbed her hand, and we hurried home to do our homework. We rushed to the car, parked several blocks away. Lisa matched my fast pace, and we silently moved along the sidewalk, almost running. I think we were both glad that Brenda forbade us to talk at that moment. What could we say to each other after this? The prohibition was a constant, silent reminder of what we were ordered to do. Go home and have intim. As we got into the car, I glanced at Lisa for a moment. She gave me the same look, and I could tell she was just as eager to get on with it as I was. I started the engine, mustered all my remaining concentration, and drove us home. Lisa received the message, quickly texted, then turned off her phone and didn't tell me anything. I felt her searching gaze as we pulled up to the house. Lisa reached for the garage door remote, and the door began to rattle open. I looked at her. Why was she doing this? These were precious, wasted seconds. I could have parked right in the yard. She never does that. I pulled into the garage, and Lisa pressed the button to start the door closing again as we got out of the car. Lisa also got out, but she remained standing by her door. I had already put my hand on the door to the house and was waiting for her. What was she doing? Please don't cry, I thought. You can cry later. You have to do it. But she looked at me with her cute eyes, silent and motionless, perhaps a little nervous. Her hand was on the door handle, and then I understood. I froze. I didn't know what to feel. I just knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't want to admit it, not in front of her, anyway. I didn't want her to misunderstand that I had forgiven her, or, worse, that I had given her permission. My hand involuntarily dropped from the doorknob, and I felt my legs move toward her. As the garage door slowly closed with a roar, I stood behind her for a moment, and she waited. I put my hand on hers just as the door slammed shut, and there was silence all around. I pressed myself against her, and she responded by pressing her fifth place to me. She turned her head and looked at me, waiting, without emotion. I pressed my lips to hers. They were swollen. We kissed. I put my hand on her chest and began to caress her. I slid my hand under her skirt. She bit my neck, and then she pushed me away, grabbing me by my shirt and pushing me against the car. Now that she had me pressed against the car, she started rubbing herself against me, and I make a sound. She told me in a low voice exactly what she did with her lover the first time. She broke the kiss, continuing to rub against me while looking into my eyes, studying me silently. I swallowed hard. She froze for a moment, then continued. The image of her treating someone else with the same passion flashed through my mind. It was painful, but at the same time exciting, to realize that she might be repeating these gestures that were once intended for someone else. Trying not to lose my composure, I stopped her, indicating that we needed to slow down a little. She laughed quietly, but did not object. Meeting my gaze, we continued in a different, more restrained manner. She broke the kiss and looked at me, waiting. Remembering her story, I opened the back door of the car. She was waiting for me to say something, to say my line, get in the back seat and lie down, but I didn't say anything. Finally, she climbed into the car herself, without saying her lines. I can't sleep with you. I'm married, I said. I followed her, climbing between her legs, lifting her skirt so that she was left in only her shoes and panties, face down. I kissed her inner thigh as we looked at each other. Her gaze quickly fell on the panties, and I took the hint, reaching for the belt and slowly pulling them down while she obediently lifted her buttocks to make it easier for me. Now she was without anything in front of me. I kissed her feet, moving closer and closer to her. When I was close, she ran her fingers through my hair and pulled my face toward hers. "Oh," she whispered. She sat up in her seat to look at me. "Take me. Have a night with me right now," she ordered. Is this how it happened? As if reading my thoughts, she nodded affirmatively. "Take me," she whispered again. Her eyes were still fixed on me. "Please do it," she begged. "Is this what you want?" I asked. She nodded, giving me a lustful look I had never seen from her before. I barely recognized her. "Yes," she replied. She stopped. "Yes," she repeated. I couldn't hold back any longer and had intim with her. She made a sound and threw her head back. When I finished, she was still looking at me. We lay there, breathing heavily, looking at each other. I laid my head on her chest, and she stroked my hair while we came to our senses. "Do we need to talk?" she asked. "About what?" "Well, about today. About what we just did. We just had intimate, Lisa. We've had an intimate before." "Okay," she said. "It's so great to see you again," Julian said cheerfully in her French accent, leading us down the corridor to Dr. Brunder's office. "How was your week?" she asked, turning to us with obvious curiosity. "How was our week?" "We had a night like teenagers all week." "No," I thought. What did Dan say about intim with his wife after their therapy? That's not how teenagers have a night. Our intimate was intense, full of the unspoken subtext of Lisa's betrayal, which loomed over everything we did. I couldn't stop imagining that it was not me, but her lover, who was having a night with her. That it was not me, but he, who was enjoying herself. I didn't know how to feel about this or how to stop these thoughts. I was worried that Lisa noticed this and that she would take it as permission, as a license to cheat, but I couldn't stop. It was like an addiction. Lisa smiled, and Julian responded with a smile and a nod, looking at us a little longer than seemed necessary. "Wonderful," she said happily as she knocked on Dr. Brunder's door. As soon as we said hello and sat down, Dr. Brunder got straight to the point. "At the end of our last session, I gave you an assignment. Have you completed it?" We nodded, and Lisa smiled shyly. "Tell me about it, please." There was a pause. "It was very good," said Lisa. "Okay," said Brunder. "But tell me more. When you came out, it was a very intense session, and I think both of you were in a very high state of night arousal when you left. Did you go home or find somewhere closer to satisfy each other?" "Home," answered Lisa. "We live nearby. And as soon as you arrived, did you start right away?" "Yes," answered Lisa. "Did you immediately run to the bedroom?" Dr. Brunder asked but didn't finish her sentence. Lisa shook her head. "We didn't make it to the bedroom," she said, smiling. Brunder leaned back in her chair and nodded, watching us. "Wonderful. Continue." I got out of the car and waited by the passenger door. He came up to me, and we kissed, Lisa began. Continue, Dr. Brunder encouraged. Well, it was actually a lot like what happened with Mark. That's the first time, Lisa said. Dr. Brunder nodded again. Something like a repeat? Yes, Lisa confirmed. Did you tell him about my message? Dr. Brunder asked. Lisa shook her head. I didn't know if I should do this. It's okay, John, Brenda said, addressing me. Just to be clear, after you both left, I came up with an idea. I sent Lisa a message and suggested the approach she took. I hope you understand. I was a little surprised that it didn't make me too angry. It felt a little like a betrayal of trust, but at the same time, there was something a little erotic in the fact that Brunder was quietly controlling our night play through her little manipulation. It was as if she, albeit in a very abstract sense, was inserting herself into our intimate act. Brunder was attractive enough that I didn't mind her playing psychological intim games with me. However, I was concerned about the position this put me in. It seems like you both are conspiring against me, I said. Brenda nodded. I understand how you feel. Please trust that every decision I make in this therapy is for your benefit as much as it is for Lisa's. I nodded. Okay, thank you. John, Lisa, were you worried about how he would react? Dr. Brunder asked. Yes, very much, Lisa said. I was hoping he wouldn't get angry, but he didn't get angry, did he? He agreed. Lisa nodded. It seemed like he didn't want to admit what we were doing, but I could understand that he liked it a lot, she said. Brenda nodded. And what was it like for you, Lisa, having your husband play the role of your lover? Wait, I said. Brenda raised a finger to indicate that I should not interrupt. Lisa swallowed. That was good. Did that excite you? Brenda asked. Lisa nodded. Why? It's hard to explain. It was just pretty. I don't know how to describe it. Brenda nodded. We'll be looking into the psychology of this for a long time, I think, but try to express as best as possible what you felt. Well, I really liked that it turned him on so much, Lisa said. I don't think I've ever seen him so turned on. I was just glad to see how much he was enjoying himself. Brenda nodded. Have you thought about the intimate encounter you were having? Have you thought about your ex-lover? Well, yes, Lisa said, but also, keep going, she added as Brenda encouraged her. I don't know. I kind of like that. I thought it was a little perverted in a good way, that John liked to think about it. Perverted in a good way. Did it turn you on that John was turned on by what you were doing with your lover? Brenda asked. Lisa nodded. Did you enjoy it? Brenda pressed. Lisa nodded again. Yes. We were all aware of what was left unsaid. I had never brought Lisa to bliss through night, but her lover had. Did the night last much longer? Brenda asked. Well, yes, Lisa answered. But you see, John had been horny for about an hour before he was ready. Brenda nodded. Did you talk about it later, about playing out your first extramarital encounter? Lisa shook her head. Did you repeat this scenario? No, it only happened once. Did you act out the other encounters? Lisa shook her head again. No, John did not ask me to describe other meetings. Sometimes in bed, it seemed that maybe he would like to, but he didn't say anything. A couple of times I did things with him that I had never done with John before. Never with John. But what did you do with your lover? Brenda asked. I wanted Brenda to stop saying lover. Was she trying to torture me? Lisa nodded. I was afraid that he would realize that this is what I did with someone else and get upset. But I thought maybe he would like it because of what we did in the car. Because of the game. Brenda nodded. Fine, we can come back to this later, to how you, John, took it all. But first, I want to make sure we get through this without blaming, reproaching, or apologizing. Lisa, did you have any desire to apologize again for your betrayal? Maybe once. Tell me about it. We had an intim. I thought we had a really good time. We teased each other for a long time, a lot of caresses, transitions from night to caresses and back again. We looked into each other's eyes as we had intimate, and he said, you liked it, didn't you? You enjoyed it when he had a night with you, you little... Lisa trailed off. A girl of easy virtue? I finished for her. Yes, she said. He said, you're a little girl of easy virtue, and it hurt me. I was like, I'm so damn sorry, John. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Kropka. And that stopped the night? Dr. Brenda asked. Yes, Lisa nodded. I understand, Brenda said. I know it's hard sometimes, Lisa, but you need to stop apologizing for everything you said, did, and felt during your cheating. You've already apologized, and constantly apologizing can become a toxic habit. John, now I will address you. I think it's quite possible that an apology wasn't even what JN was trying to achieve by saying that. Brunder looked at me. What do you think, John? Can you tell us your motives for this outburst, as you understand them? I shrugged. Can you blame me for still being angry? I don't blame you for anything, Brunder replied. But was it really anger that caused this outburst? What else? I asked. Brunder looked at me searchingly. Very often, we are not aware of the true reasons for what we say or do. We act and then come up with an explanation for why we did it. Do you think I wasn't angry? Perhaps you were, but that's not necessarily the reason why you said what you said at that moment, Brunder said. I shrugged, tired. Explain this to me. Well, we'll figure it out together. Let's go back to the beginning and consider your perspective. You've just returned home, and the details of your wife's infidelity have certainly had a huge impact on you. You're incredibly intimacy aroused, which is probably causing confusion given the reason for it. Your wife. Okay, you can stop, I interrupted. I'm ready for this. I've done some research, and I want to share it before we go down this path of feminist psychobabble. Brunder raised an eyebrow, but remained silent. Yes, I was a little confused about my feelings. I continued, and I researched it on the internet. It's pretty standard, normal in fact, for a man who has been cheated on to feel a strong desire to have intimate intercourse with his partner to ensure that it is his genes, not his competitors, that will be used to produce his offspring. Men who feel a strong need to have a night with their wives after discovering an affair are simply acting on an evolutionary imperative. If our ancestors hadn't felt this, we wouldn't exist. Brunder looked at me blankly. I see, she said, waiting for me to continue. I thought I had made my point, so I simply looked at her, deciding not to yield in the silent duel of glances. Thank you for sharing this, John, Brunder said, realizing that this was all I had to offer. I don't dispute the logic of your words. Can you explain why you decided to share this here? What I mean is that all of our impulses are probably shaped by evolution, just like our physical features. But how can this help our goals? I just mean I don't like what you imply about my motivations. Let's speak directly and not beat around the bush. Brunder nodded. Okay, just because Lisa's little intimate story turned me on doesn't mean I'm glad another man had a night with my wife. Brunder nodded and continued to study me before looking back at Lisa. Lisa, have you ever considered that John was glad another man had a night with you? She asked calmly. What? Lisa exclaimed. Brunder nodded, then looked at me again. I don't remember making that assumption, John. You seem worried about being suspected of this. Let's clear this up. It might be helpful. Okay, that's enough, I said. These are games. You didn't say it outright, but I can read between the lines. Brunder nodded. I'm not your accuser, John. I'm your consultant. We're trying to achieve the kind of honesty necessary to build a more trusting and fulfilling relationship between the two of you. It takes work to be honest with each other, but perhaps even more work to be honest with ourselves. See yourself as you are. I can't see in your mind, John. This is not my role. My role, in part, is to help you come to an understanding of yourself. To do this, we need to look at the facts and not deny them. What facts? Very good. Let's get back to the point. So you go home, and as always, don't let me make false assumptions. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. So, you come home from our first session, and you're incredibly pretty. You're ready to have a night with your wife. She waits by the car, and at some point, you realize she is offering you the opportunity to take her the way her lover did, to show you everything they did that first meeting. You've heard it all before, and could have refused her offer, told her to go to bed, but that wasn't your decision. These are facts. But how do we interpret them? One option is perhaps you want to give her the opportunity to relive her first intimate experience with her lover. This is wrong, I interrupted. Fine, then we can put this interpretation aside. Another possibility is that you may have had an intimate need to visualize her having an intimate encounter with her lover. You wanted, in the most accessible way possible, to see your wife have a night with another man. It's kind of voyeurism of these facts, John. Certainly, I said. Do you have your own version? Brunder asked. I have one, I replied. You're the expert here. Well, as an expert, I think that in the absence of better guesses at this point, we can continue to explore the possibility of voyeuristic motivation during that night. Did you ever try to imagine how your wife was giving pleasure and having an intim with her lover instead of you? Have you tried to imagine what it looked like? I didn't have an answer. Didn't you enjoy the experience, imagining her reacting more strongly to him? Can you tell me that it didn't turn you on, imagining your wife's pleasure while having a night with him? She let me suffer, I said, but that doesn't mean I'm glad she did it. I repeat again, I never said that this was the case. But we have to face our feelings, John. I'm not trying to shame you when I say this. No shame. It's not just about Lisa. This applies to you too. You don't have to be ashamed of your intimate needs. She gave me time to think about it. I felt Lisa looking at me, but I continued to keep my gaze on Brunder. So, going back to that outburst of emotion that you didn't have, I don't think it was anger that caused it. What exactly did you say? She looked at her notes and read aloud. You liked this, didn't you? You enjoyed the hell out of him having a night with you. You're a little girl of easy virtue. It doesn't sound like anger. It's expressed in the language of patriarchal control and condemnation of female intimate desire. But we can only speak the language we've been taught, she added. Lisa spoke up. If it wasn't anger, then what was it? Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, Brunder said. He asked you if you enjoyed a night with another man. Brunder shrugged. He already knew the answer, of course. Brunder looked at both of us. Lisa looked at me. Or maybe you don't know what you're talking about, I said. Is it really impossible to assume that your wife's pleasure in intimate with another man turns you on, John? Is it really not possible to assume that you were turned on not only by the fact that she did it, but perhaps even more by the fact that she liked it? I'm not some kind of pervert. No, you're not like that, Brenda said. And we will work to relieve you of the anxiety associated with seeing yourself this way. This will go a long way toward repairing the damage your marriage has suffered. Our marriage didn't suffer because I have anxiety. It got hurt because she couldn't keep her damn legs together. I snapped. Brunder leaned back and looked at me coldly. I sighed. I know. No blame or shame, she said. I sighed again. She nodded. Not only for Lisa's sake, John, but also for your own sake. When we use blame and shame toward others, we are very often projecting or trying to redirect what we feel toward ourselves. You won't free Lisa by forgiving her, John. You will free yourself by forgiving yourself. Yeah, okay. Brunder continued, ignoring my dismissive tone. Now, back to the question. Lisa, as I said, it is quite possible that although the question was asked in anger, it was sincere and not rhetorical, especially considering the context. I think if this happens again, instead of giving in to the remorse reflex, you should honestly answer any questions he asks. Even if the question seems to be aimed at shaming you. Do not pay attention to that shame, because it is most likely his own shame for himself. Oh my God, I said. I'm not ashamed of myself. I was angry. It doesn't turn me on. There's something there, Brenda said. What something? I asked. That audio recording, she said. Do you still have it? Why, John? Why didn't you delete it? How many times have you pleasured yourself while listening to your wife enjoying a night with another man? How many times, John? I didn't say anything. Let's just say it was more than once, right? She pressed. Why? I asked. Have you ever wanted to see them have an intimate live? To watch them? I'm not trying to shame you, John. Quite the opposite. But we need to ask each other and ourselves questions that are difficult to answer. These are the questions that are difficult to answer. She paused. Have you ever wished you had a video instead of an audio recording? Her gaze turned to Lisa. By the way, Lisa, is there a video? Lisa looked at the floor and swallowed. No. Brunder nudged her. We were all silent until Lisa was able to say it. Not anymore. He made a few. I started. Lisa's eyes flickered to mine, then back to the floor. I felt the blood rushing in my ears. Are they intimacy explicit? Brunder asked. Graphic. Lisa nodded, looking at the floor. Don't you have any copies? Brunder asked. Lisa shook her head. I was afraid I'd be caught with them. After we finished everything, I asked him to remove them. He deleted them. Brunder nodded and leaned back. What is your relationship with Mark now? Are you still friends? Well, I think so, Lisa replied. He was disappointed when I told him we should stop, but we work together sometimes. We communicate normally. Brunder's eyes turned to me. John, I'm guessing you'd really like to watch these videos, huh? I couldn't say a word. Lisa can just ask for copies, and they will be yours. Would you like that? He deleted them, Lisa repeated. No way, I muttered. He definitely has copies, Brunda said, her eyes still on me. What do you say, John? I think this would greatly help our progress. If only Lisa could get copies of these videos so you could watch them, among other things. This would help dispel the information gap that separates the two of you. Then there would be no gaps left for you to fill in with your imagination. Damn it, are you serious? I said. My wife will never talk to him about those videos again, or something like that. So, you still want to see them? No, crap. And anyway, what will she tell him? Hey, Mark, can you send me copies of those videos of us having a night? My husband wants to watch them. You sound sarcastic, but I think that would be a great approach. We need to overcome your shame and admit your desires, especially to others. Expressing them is a great step towards self-acceptance. You're crazy, I said. If you are not ready for this, Lisa can simply say that she would like to have them for her own pleasure, which is probably also true. It's better not to lie. When we lie, we express to the world that our shame is justified. I just looked at her. You don't want to see them, John? Lisa said quietly. I wouldn't be so sure, Brunda said, still looking at me. Then she leaned back and looked at both of us. Anyway, don't ask Mark for a video until John asks you to. Until then, she was so confident in herself. Lisa nodded. Brunda leaned back. Actually, John, I don't want you to watch them until you or Lisa consult with me. We need to think carefully about the therapeutic role these videos can play. Lisa, as soon as John asks you to get them, text me, and we can discuss next steps. Okay. You have my number, she added. Lisa nodded. Fine, our time is almost up this week. Lisa, I want you to tell John as much as you can about your affair in detail. We need to dispel the myths and destroy all the secrets that divide you. Given the number of intimate encounters you've had, this may take some time, but try not to be shy about the details, okay? Today you could do it in the context of intimate roleplay if you want. After today, John, I want you to just satisfy yourself while she tells you about her encounters. Don't even touch her. Lisa, if you want, you can also satisfy yourself during the stories, or you don't have to. It's your decision. Fine, Lisa nodded. Brunda was waiting for my answer. Are you telling me not to have an intim with my wife for 6 days? John, is this worth your marriage? I sighed and nodded. And no vulgar content for now, okay? This is important. No night scenes at all. She waited for me to nod. Okay. As soon as we got home, she pinned me against the door. On the way home, she told me everything that led up to her second meeting with him. There was correspondence, a struggle with conscience, she said. I wanted to refuse his request to meet at his place next week, but my body was craving it. I felt terrible about what I did, she said. I love you. I love our marriage, but it was very satisfying what he did to me. I'm sorry, but I didn't know intimate could be like this. I wanted it again. I hated myself for it, but I wanted it again. I justified it by saying that I would allow myself one evening with him where we could take our time in bed, instead of a quick meeting in the back seat. That would be the end of it. This will be my only mistake in life. Everyone gets one chance, right? Then she made up some excuse about going on a day trip with her friend Dolores. I kissed her goodbye, and she rushed to him. I almost had an accident while taking off my panties on the way. Should I take them off now, John? Do you want me to be like I was then? Of course, I nodded. And now, she continued, I was having the best pleasure of my life, and my wife was recreating for me how she treated her lover. We made eye contact, and she nodded. I wanted this so much, John. I wanted him to have a night with me as soon as possible. I crave it so much. Take me to bed. I told him. I need you to have intimate with me. I nodded. She stood up and walked upstairs, taking off her t-shirt along the way. I got out of my pants and followed her, taking off the rest of my clothes. In the bedroom, she turned and kissed me. Now, in one swift motion, she caressed me gently, and I put my hand under her skirt. She lay down on the bed on her back. I wanted to please him, she continued. I told him I wanted to skip that part. I told him I needed him to have a night with me right now. I was ready. I asked him if he was ready. Would he like it? Lisa nodded at me, without looking away. Are you ready? Do you want to have an intimate with me? I nodded, and then approached her. He pulled her toward him, and their bodies touched with renewed vigor, as if every centimeter of skin was sensitive to the slightest touch. Their embrace grew tighter, as if they were trying to become one, forgetting everything else in the world. His hands gently slid along her back, feeling every curve of her body. Her breathing became heavier, but not from fatigue. Every breath they took was synchronized, as if their souls and hearts were beating in the same rhythm. He slowed down the rhythm, catching every sound of her breathing, every subtle movement of her body, plunging into the magic of the moment. He didn't want to rush, because every second together seemed like an eternity. Her body succumbed to his rhythm, but still every time there was something new, unknown. At that moment, he thought about nothing but her. Every time she closed her eyes in pleasure, he felt how stronger their connection became. She suddenly spoke quietly, telling him how she had once experienced strong feelings at another point in her life, which gave him mixed feelings. He didn't know how to react to her frankness. Emotions swirled inside him, jealousy, doubt, and a desire to understand. But he didn't let it ruin the moment. Despite the internal struggle, he decided to focus on the present, on what was happening between them now. He wanted to deepen their connection, make this moment uniquely theirs, and help her feel loved and special here and now. Her voice broke the silence again, saying that what was important to her was not the speed or intensity, but the sensuality of the moment. She wanted them to enjoy every second, every movement, every touch. He heard her and followed her request, slowing his movements, allowing them both to sink into the sensation even deeper. Their bodies moved smoothly, like two partners in a dance, following a rhythm that only they knew. Her every movement seemed to be a response to his touch, and his every gesture was filled with attention to her pleasure. Their embraces became even more passionate and filled with tenderness. She unexpectedly and quietly admitted to him that it was important for her to feel special at the moment of intimacy. There was deep sincerity in her voice, and this confession touched him. He realized how much it meant to her, not just physical intimacy, but also the emotional connection that arises in such moments. It was not just a touch of bodies. It was a connection of souls. The strength of mutual trust was felt in their slow, measured movements, and every new breath, every touch, was like a promise of care and devotion. They dissolved in this moment, forgetting about time and space, immersing themselves in each other. Everything around them ceased to exist. All that remained was their desire to make each other happy, to give each other moments they would keep in memory. Their hearts beat in unison, and their breaths mingled into one. I rolled over onto my back and lay down. Lisa turned to me and put her hand on my chest. She kissed my ear as I stared at the ceiling. "Was this your best time, John?" she asked. I didn't say anything. "I thought it was," she said softly. "Some man has a video of him having a night with my wife." I knew what it would be like. A shaky cell phone video of him having intimate with her from different positions and bad lighting. Damn it, I thought. What kind of obsession is this? What kind of disease is this? Did he show them to his friends? Of course, I thought. He must have shown them to other men. She said he was vain. How could he not show off how he has a hot married prostitute, while her squeals, like I heard on the tape? "Oh my God," Lisa whispered in my ear. "You're already horny again." She sighed softly, warmly into my neck. "John," she said quietly, it seems to me that I thought life was real, and then suddenly it turns out it was not reality. This is real life. It's like I was buying some kind of fake product. It was all just a pretense, or like a disease. It seems that only now am I beginning to see what real life is. You understand? This is nonsense. I debated with myself all morning about whether to call. After 2 hours of complete unproductivity at work, I decided there was no choice. I couldn't get it out of my head. After waiting in line for 20 minutes, I finally got through. "Damn nonsense." "I know what you're doing, John." Brunder's voice was calm and questioning. "Yes," I said, pacing nervously around the room. "Do you often get calls from husbands who have every reason to be so angry?" "I suppose so. I can't divulge information about other patients, John." "You understand that she played with me?" "You're kidding me, perhaps a little bit." "You're being rather abrupt, John." and a little rude. Okay, fair enough. But ever since my wife told me 2 days ago how much she enjoyed being her lover's little prostitute, I've only been allowed to satisfy myself while she told me about her encounters with him. And it made me angry. What made me even angrier was that I couldn't just stop. I asked her to tell me more. What the hell is wrong with me? Why do I need this kind of torture? Asking her to continue telling me more while I satisfy myself with her stories of betrayal. It was your fault, Brunder, that Lisa wouldn't let me have an intim, which was our only intimate outlet. Doctor's orders, she repeated. I called Brunder to talk to her, but she was the only one I could talk to about it. The only one who could understand me, explain it to me. I couldn't tell anybody about it. John, are you still here? Yes. Talk to me. I want this to stop. To make what stop? This nonsense. Can you come to my appointment today? I have a cancellation at 4:30. I sighed. John, isn't this unusual, seeing one side of a couple in couples counseling? Well, but you're unusual yourself, right? I flared up. A brief pause on the phone. At 2:30, John, she said coldly. I rehearsed what I wanted to say in the car. It seemed right then. I was also proud of myself because I didn't break down and ask Lisa to get the videos that the stupid took of her. I felt that this strengthened my position with Brunder. I was sure that this was why Brunder introduced a ban on adult films. To make me desperate. Crap. Everything was so damn confusing. Why did I endure all this? I wasn't going to do it anymore. However, sitting in front of Brunder with her cool, penetrating eyes, I lost all confidence in what I had rehearsed. It was all too easy to imagine her easily destroying all my arguments. I realized that I needed to find a new strategy on the fly. We sat in silence for several minutes. Water, she asked. Thank you. Brunda stood up to pour me a glass and then brought it to me. I stood up to take it, then sat down and took a sip while Brunda looked at me for a moment. She then surprised me by moving her chair closer and sitting next to me instead of returning to her desk. Despite myself, I felt her closeness. Pleasant? She said, her knee almost touching mine as she leaned forward slightly. I couldn't help but notice the shape of her breasts under her shirt. Her long, wavy blonde hair framed her sharp but attractive features. You were excited when you called, she said. Talk to me about what's bothering you. For a moment, I wondered how she spoke to her lovers. What kind of men did she choose as her lovers? I hesitated. I didn't know where to start. You said, I know where this is leading. I felt a little uneasy about where she thought this was going. What's bothering you so much? I wanted to find the right words to dispel any nonsense, to make it clear where the line was, but not to make accusations I couldn't back up with facts. I'm worried that things are moving in a direction that is more in Lisa's interest than mine. Brunda nodded. And by Lisa's interest, what do you mean? Brunder's clear blue eyes met mine and then fell on my hands, which, as I only then noticed, were nervously fiddling with something. I stopped and leaned back in my chair, resting my hands on the armrests. I held her gaze. Are we thinking the same thing? She asked. Did you and Lisa follow my recommendations? I nodded with a sour smile, glad to have found something to latch onto. Yes, we followed Dr. Brunder, and I'd like you to explain why. Quite frankly, I can't have a night with my wife. Brunder nodded. My recommendation to abstain from intim with Lisa for a week is part of important therapy, John. Can I ask you, have you ever had the experience of abstaining from intimate with Lisa for an entire week before you found out about her cheating? I was seething with anger. I have a feeling that there was more night before that. How often? I said, ignoring her question. I was ready to leave. To be honest, I'm still ready. I'm mad as hell. We took vows. I was faithful. She cheated on me. I don't know how to learn to trust her again. This is what I need. I need to figure out what the hell happened to my life and how I can fix it. And I really don't understand how pleasuring myself while my wife tells dirty stories about herself to another man is going to help me do that. Brunda nodded. Okay, John, thank you. You said a lot of things. I want to make sure I understand everything correctly. If I understand you correctly, what you're saying is this. First, you feel betrayed, right? Yes. Secondly, you don't understand why Lisa did what she did? Yes. And you don't know how to fix it, namely, how to find a path to a happy marriage. Yes. And finally, my method seemed confusing to you, and you feel anxious about this? I nodded in response to each of her statements. Okay, she continued. On the first point, you say you were betrayed. I nodded. Yes, you were betrayed. I agree. You, Lisa, and I, Lisa, made a promise and broke it. This is what we are dealing with now. This is the main thing in this whole story. You accept the possibility that you can forgive this and move on. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, right? Yes. Fine. Now, the second point. You don't understand why she did this? Brunder fell silent, waiting for me to continue. That's right, I said. Brunder leaned back in her chair. Is it true you still don't understand why she did it? She seemed disappointed. What? I said. Well, no, I don't understand. I'm a good husband. I'm listening. I'm affectionata. I'm generous. I do everything to please her in every sense. Intimacy, you mean? Yes, I try to please her, not only intimacy, but yes, I do my best to please her in bed. Brenda nodded. After you found out that Lisa cheated on you, in addition to contacting me for advice, did you take any other steps to understand why she did it? Well, of course, I asked her. And you weren't satisfied with what she said as an explanation? Well, she said. Yes, interrupted Brunder. She said something similar in our first session, didn't she? I nodded. But that didn't suit you? No. Why? I felt that John, she interrupted a little impatiently. In such a situation, having been caught cheating and wanting to save the marriage, isn't it obvious that anything she could say would just be an act for the audience? This is what people do when they're caught with their hand in the cookie jar. You would do the same. That's why you weren't satisfied with it, isn't it? To the public, the truth didn't matter. She just wanted to find a way out of the mess she got herself into. Her words had nothing to do with the truth. She simply said what she thought would be most likely to get her out of trouble. I nodded. That's why there was no satisfaction. Did you take any other steps to find out why she did what she did, thinking you wouldn't get the truth out of her? I sighed heavily. I guess I acted like any person who needs answers right now. Did you Google why do women cheat? I felt stupid. Something like that. And you discovered that according to the sages of the internet, women cheat for a number of reasons. To feel wanted or adored, to be validated, or because they lack connection in their relationships. Something like that. Brenda nodded. And that didn't satisfy you? I shrugged. I'm not an expert, I said in a defensive and annoyed tone. That's why I'm here, Brenda responded. You don't need an expert for this. That's the easy part. This whole discussion about women cheating because they need to feel adored, wanted, I think you're smart enough to realize that it's all just peddled by the scribblers who write articles for women's magazines, and worse, by most psychologists and regular marriage counselors. Because that's the kind of explanation that allows you to be sucked into an endless stream of meaningless talk about how to talk to each other the right way, a love language, or some other equally toxic idea. If you buy into it, you'll have to talk like a fool until you finally realize that it's all empty, useless, pointless, soul-killing quackery. She looked into my eyes. Or, am I mistaken? You might be thinking that if you hugged her more, tried harder to make her feel adored and wanted, listened more attentively about her day. You think that if you did it more often and better, then Mark couldn't have seduced your wife that night and on subsequent occasions. Do you think so, John? I'm asking you. Our eyes met. Are you going to put this crisis in your life down to the fact that you just fell a little short in the cuddling department, and now you both need to start telling each other how much you appreciate each other and open up to discuss your emotional needs? The city is full of therapists who will happily let you believe that's all, for an hourly fee. John, go to them if you think I'm so unconventional. Go and find out where it takes you and how it ends. I have a long waiting list, John. I don't need you. I felt like I was being besieged. Look, I'm sorry that You're not at all confused about why she did it, John, she continued, ignoring my apology. Tell me why she did it. Have we really gotten anywhere? I looked down at the floor and took a deep breath. Why? John, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, I said, quoting what she had said earlier. Say it. I looked at her. She just wanted to get into him, I said. Brenda looked into my eyes and then nodded slowly. We were silent for several moments. Her expression softened. Are you okay? She asked, conciliatory, leaning back and softening her tone. I nodded. You are strong enough for this, John, she said firmly. I nodded again. Water? I'm fine, thanks, I said. So, what now? Is everything hopeless? How can I stop this so it doesn't happen again? Okay, she said, before we touch on new topics, let's get back to what you said that's bothering you. You mentioned that you have anxiety about how therapy is going, right? I nodded. It must seem strange to you that someone you barely know is interfering in your life, even in your nightlife, changing what happens in your life and why. Well, John, the situation you and Lisa are in right now is untenable. You cannot continue to live with her with this level of jealousy, resentment, and mistrust. Your marriage will eventually fail unless we can change your mind. I don't mean something as simple as making a decision. People talk about forgiveness or the unforgivable as something that can be easily resolved. No, if it were that simple, we would all be saints. It requires a change of consciousness, in the sense that you need to change the way your brain works. Your consciousness is just your brain. It is not separate from you. It is an organ and can be trained like a muscle. If you want it to do something, you need to behave in a certain way constantly. If you want to learn to play the piano, you don't just decide that, and that's it. No, you have to sit behind it day after day, play, practice, and then gradually your consciousness changes, and you begin to do it. I looked at the floor. She leaned forward to get closer to my line of sight. You can't forgive Lisa by pretending that this didn't happen. You have to face what happened in your life with her. You have to realize what you did, what she did, and face each other and yourself as you really are and what you have or don't have to offer each other. She paused. And it's important that after trauma, we experience our feelings. When someone we love dies, we need to mourn rather than turn away from our grief. A traumatic event like discovering infidelity is similar in that we need to face our feelings, even if we don't want to. I cannot tell you exactly how you should feel about this. I can only advise and help you experience these feelings, John. I looked at her. We are taught from childhood that life will be a certain way. As we grow up, we absorb stories about what life should be like and what marriage is all about. We see that in fairy tales, everything ends with a wedding, and nothing further is told, because after marriage, real life begins, John. Adult life. Things we don't tell children about. Something no one could tell us when we were children. She fell silent. You must be ready to go beyond fairy tales and face real adult life. John, she waited. I nodded. Fine. And John, another aspect that is also untenable if there is no change is the level of eroticism between you and Lisa now. Right now, you have great passion for her, but much of this will disappear if we don't find new ways to maintain and renew this fuel. Otherwise, you'll slip into an intimate life that won't be satisfying enough to sustain your relationship. I will help you find your way, but it will require hard work and sacrifice on your part, and you will have to trust me. Do you trust me, John? She put her hand on my knee. I sighed heavily. Listen, we talk a lot about me and what I should do, I said, but what brought us to this point was that my wife cheated on me. Most of all, I need to know that she won't cheat on me again. I don't see any work being done to fix this or ways to make sure she doesn't do it again. Brenda gently squeezed my knee and smiled warmly. John, I promise you that this is my main goal, to make sure this doesn't become a problem in the future. Okay. I sighed heavily, feeling a slight sense of relief. That's all I ask. After my session with Brenda, I went to work but found it difficult to concentrate. I left Brenda's office with some satisfaction and confidence. However, this feeling gradually faded. What had really been achieved? It was as if Brenda had cast a spell on me that slowly wore off, leaving me with a new sense of unease. I came home before Lisa. Brenda said that she would have to tell Lisa that I called and came to see her. I wondered how she would react to this. As soon as Lisa closed the door behind her, I realized that she was unhappy. She gave me a cold look, roughly threw the keys on the table by the door, and took off her shoes. Without saying a word, she headed to the kitchen. I heard her open a bottle of wine and then return to the living room with a glass of white wine, sitting down on the sofa next to me with her legs tucked under her. She took a sip and then spoke without looking at me. It was humiliating. I sighed. What? To find out at work that you lost control and called our damn therapist, questioning her intentions. She said, "Well done, John. Damn. Very worthy. My God." She took another sip. Is that what she said? Lisa finally looked at me. No, not in those words, but I can read between the lines, John. Am I wrong? I shrugged. Damn it, she muttered. I can't imagine being the first husband to call her upset. If she treats everyone the way she treats me. Lisa's eyes glared at me. Dr. Brunder is trying to save our marriage, John. Or do you not care? Is this all useless? Are you just pretending to care and then leaving me? Is that true? If so, John, damn it, drop everything and leave right now. Don't waste our time. That's not the point, Lisa. I want to save our marriage. Then act like it, she snapped. If you want to save our marriage, John, we go to goddamn therapy. Invest in it. Commit yourself to it. So don't do therapy half-heartedly. You can't call a goddamn therapist and tell her she's playing for someone else, John. I didn't say that. What exactly did Brenda say? Lisa shook her head. Not much. She just texted me, but I get it. Lisa, I'm sorry. I'm really trying to figure this out. She waited. I feel like we're being treated like you did nothing wrong. And I should be glad that you did what you did. You can't let it go. Can you, John? Yes, I was a bad wife. I did something bad. I apologized. I'm not going to apologize anymore. You have to get over it or it won't work. Can you survive this? She looked at me. I don't know, I admitted. She turned away and took another sip of wine. Her phone rang, and she checked it. This is Dr. Brunder, she said. She said she would call when she finished her sessions for the day. I got up and went to the kitchen to pour myself a glass of wine, listening to Lisa's conversation. Hey, Dr. Brunder. Listen, I just want to apologize. I just talked to John and let him know that No, it's not okay. I'm really sorry. Okay. I sat back down on the couch. Lisa was absent-mindedly fiddling with her big toe as she spoke. Yes, things were going well. I thought everything was going great until I heard, and yes, we're probably a third of the way there. Yeah, yes, no, he likes it, I can say. It's just that sometimes when we're not in night situation, Yes, no, that's fair. Yes, no, yes, okay. Yes, very good. As far as I can tell, I'm worried he's getting dehydrated. I don't know where all this is coming from. Orange juice? Okay, yes, got it. She picked up her glass from the coffee table and took a sip. Yes, really? Ouch, really? Well, I hope you have spare parts because... Really? Well, you'll have to... Okay. Yes, tomorrow after work is convenient. About 5 o'clock would be enough. Okay, well, if it doesn't work out, I can leave early. Okay, let me know. Great. Listen, Dr. Brunder, I just want to say thank you very much. Yes, no, I think we're doing well, in spite of... Well, thank you. Yes, I think we are really moving in the right direction. Yes, I hope so too. Really? Okay. Thanks again. Goodbye. Lisa hung up and looked at me. So, what did Brenda say? She sighed. She understood everything very well, John. I need you to stop doing this. I know. I'm sorry. It's not easy for me. Lisa looked at me and stroked my thigh, giving me a sad smile. She leaned over and kissed me. Okay, she said, let's leave this behind. What's there tomorrow after work? What was it about? Well, first, the good news. Starting tomorrow, we'll be able to touch each other again. Okay, what about tomorrow? She gave me a friendly slap on the thigh. Tomorrow, we're going to Dr. Brunder and Associates to pick out a night toy from what I understand is a very extensive collection. You still here? What? She shrugged. Yeah, they have a collection at Dr. Brunder and Associates. Obviously. Well, of course they do. She shrugged again. You know they do. In therapy, we found out that couples sometimes use toys in their night lives. It's pretty common. We've never used them, but why not? We're in new territory now, right? I nodded. Yes, fine. Do they have a choice after 5? She asked. She said she would ask Julian if she could stay longer. I offered to come before closing, but they needed us both to come for a short trip together. Yes, I think you were right. Fine. By the way, does Brenda know about the internet? They say you can also order toys there or go to an intimate shop. According to her, their collection is unparalleled. I nodded. Naturally. What's a reputable therapy facility without a collection of night toys? Okay, well, there's something else I need to tell you about. Well, about intimate toys, I suggested. Lisa nodded. We walked to Brunder and Associates, leaving the car nearby. It was cold. I have to choose one that will be as similar in size and shape as possible to I stopped. She stopped too. staring at me. On him, I asked. Lisa nodded. I sighed. For what? She didn't say anything. Damn it, for what? I repeated. To torture me? Lisa sighed and wrapped her arms around me. You know how much attention Dr. Brunder pays to dispelling all the secrets between us regarding what I did? I think that's part of the process. We kill our secrets before they kill us, John. She kissed me. And besides, is this really torture? I understand that this may be difficult, but you probably like a little imagining what happened. It's a little okay, right? To hell with it. Let's get this over with. I interrupted her, feeling irritated. She took my hand, and soon we came to the large glass doors, which were locked. It looks like the purchase is canceled today, I said. There goes Julian. Julian, a small, energetic French girl in a miniskirt and a thin, tight sweater, ran toward us with a tablet in her hands and waved through the glass. She quickly opened the door. Sorry, she exclaimed through the glass panel. Then, when she opened the door, she added, Sorry, hi John, Lisa. She gave us a French peck in the air. Come in, she said as she closed the door behind us and locked it. Thank you very much, Julian, Lisa said. I know you had to stay late. Oh, that's no problem. We're going shopping. It's fun, right? Lisa giggled quietly. It was hard not to warm to Julian with her French accent and constant cheerfulness. I was afraid that choosing an intimate toy in front of her would be extremely awkward, but I immediately felt that she was able to handle it without unnecessary tension. We followed her down the hallway on the other side of the large reception area from Brunner's office. Julian checked her tablet as we walked. Do we need a toy? She asked with a pleasant smile. Yes, Lisa nodded, smiling timidly. Dr. Brunder? Lisa hesitated. Certainly, Julian agreed. We walked to the door, and Julian opened it, motioning for us to enter. She followed us inside. It was a white room without furniture. Along the walls were cabinets, tall up to the ceiling and half full with numbers. Okay, Julian said, running her finger over the list on her tablet. Sorry, they recently rearranged everything here. C15 to C18. She opened the closet door. Lisa and I were shocked by the number of items. There were more than 100 of them on the shelves. Voila, Julian said with a smile. We came closer with undisguised curiosity. Sorry, I don't have the sizes here, Julian said, pointing to her chart. What size, approximately? Her eyes darted between Lisa and me, not knowing who to turn to. Well, big, said Lisa. Big. Julian had already closed the closet door, but then changed her mind and opened it again. More of these, she clarified. Lisa nodded. Julian smiled happily and finally closed the door. Sometimes it's big, she explained, smiling and pointing to the door. Of course, Lisa confirmed with a smile. I felt slightly offended but tried not to show it. In my opinion, they were already big enough. Julian moved to the next door, saying, Don't worry, we have plenty, with a small smile, looking at both of us and nodding for reassurance. We'll find what you need, I promise. Much more, or a little bit? Lisa paused and cleared her throat. Julian nodded. Okay, a lot. Lisa nodded. Julian's smile widened, and we walked past the next closet without opening it. Julian opened the next door with obvious pleasure and waited for Lisa's reaction to the contents. Which one will Lisa choose? Which one is most similar to the one that has mastered her dozens of times? Julian's eyes were focused on Lisa, who was intently examining the shelves. Finally, Lisa looked at Julian, her expression incomprehensible, at least to me, but Julian understood everything. She closed the closet and opened the next one. My heart sank. Damn it. I couldn't help muttering as Julian enthusiastically opened the next door. Julian laughed and patted my hand. She said quietly, approvingly. She clapped her hands with joy, then pressed them to her chest and cheerfully jumped up to Lisa. Okay, now let's see which of these gentlemen will go home with a new girlfriend. Do you have a preference for shape or other features? It's not so much a preference as it is, Lisa began. Oh yes, I understand, I interjected. I was tactless. Sorry. Julian glanced at me and squeezed my shoulder in apology. Sorry again, she said. Their design is, of course, very creative. I try to change the topic, looking at the various options. Design? No. These are reproductions. I looked at her blankly. My feelings of inadequacy returned with a vengeance. Julian hesitated, shrugged, and straightened her hair behind her ear, bowing her head slightly. "Sometimes I make them myself," she said with a slightly shy but proud smile. "I studied art in France. I don't just carry a tablet." "Is it true?" Lisa asked with interest. Julian nodded, beaming. "Who are these men?" asked Lisa. "Some of them are clients. Others are volunteers." "Why are there so many of them?" Lisa asked, full of surprise. "Well, for therapy, couples who are having difficulties often benefit greatly from, well, sometimes they're called toys. But I don't like that word because for me it's an art. Couples often bring new happiness, and the more choice, the better. Our fantasies and desires, are somehow so different." Lisa nodded, clearly understanding. "And for doctors like Dr. Brunder, it's also research. There's scientists. For every toy, there's a questionnaire, so to speak, which the man fills out." "Who are these men?" Lisa asked again. "The ones here. Many of them are clients. We have a retreat that some privileged clients can attend in Lake Epsilon. I think you'll go there one day. It's sometimes part of therapy. I'm sure you will go." She shouldn't have said this. "Don't tell Dr. Brunder I said this, but you're the right couple to go there. It's such a wonderful place, a wonderful experience. Not only for clients. Other people also come there just to relax because it's very good there." Lisa, and I just looked at her. Julian smiled and nodded. "I know it seems strange to you, but this is art. For Dr. Brunder, it's science. They're also sold anonymously, of course, but it subsidizes Dr. Brunder's work, so she can treat couples who don't have enough money. And of course, she uses them for therapy." She shrugged again and was slightly embarrassed. "As I said, for me, it's also art. Making toys really makes me happy. This is part of the body, the beauty of the body. For thousands of years, people have depicted night toys. I'll make a John toy like this," she added cheerfully, putting her hand on my shoulder and smiling. I raised my eyebrows. I had nothing to say. I looked at Lisa, who also smiled. Julian nodded. "Well, we haven't heard anything about the retreat, so I don't know," Lisa said. Julian put her hand on Lisa's arm. "You will hear, I promise," she said. "But don't tell Dr. Brunder what I said, but you are just the right couple to go there," she added enthusiastically, looking at both of us in turn. "But okay, we're here to shop," Julian exclaimed cheerfully. Lisa also returned to what she was doing, and soon took out a huge night toy and began to examine it, twirling this obscene thing in her hands. "Does this look like it?" Julian asked. "Yes. I'm looking for something with a slight upward curve, Lisa said thoughtfully, looking around the shelves again. "Yes," Julian said quietly, looking through the shelves with her. "Just a little," Lisa clarified, "and symmetrical, not crooked." Julian nodded thoughtfully. "And this one?" She took out another one and handed it to Lisa instead of the previous one. Lisa examined it briefly. "Yes, quite similar." She pulled out another night toy and happily handed it to Lisa. "Oh," Lisa said admiringly. Julian handed it to her. "Yes," Julian asked hopefully. "Oh my God," Lisa said admiringly, twirling it in her hands. She stroked it a little, thinking it over. "It's true. Is this our guy?" Julian asked happily. "You can take a few home and decide," Julian added. "No, this is Lisa's side. This is the same one. Is the color suitable? Similar to his?" "Perfect." Julian clapped her hands happily again and jumped a little for joy. "So what now?" Lisa asked. Julian took the tablet. "I need to write down the number. Instructions for use," she read. Then she lowered the tablet. "It's very simple. Is it possible?" she asked. Lisa handed her the toy. Julian opened the base and inserted a couple of batteries she had taken from the closet. "Have you used something like this before?" Julian asked. Lisa shook her head. "I'm so happy for you," Julian said, placing her hand on Lisa's arm. "But in other ways, he's not that good. It's impossible to reproduce the passion with which a real lover makes those movements that bring such pleasure. And besides, with, how can I say, a psychologist?" "Psychology," Lisa suggested, having guessed her accent. "Yes, thank you. I need to be better with this word in English. You see, psychologically speaking, we women, yes, thank you. I need to be better with this word in English." You see, psychologically speaking, we women get pleasure from knowing that we are bringing joy. But he will give you pleasure, and that's the main thing. Lisa smiled. And I think John will also enjoy bringing you joy with his help. Right, John? She winked at me. I smiled tightly and nodded. Okay, my advice is to wash it with a soapy cloth and not submerge it in water. What else? I find it helpful if it's a little cool to warm it up with a heating pad or a hot damp towel to keep it as warm as a real lover. Julian smiled happily, looking up at Lisa. Then she hugged her tightly. Lisa thanked me, stroking my thigh. Thank you, John. I know it wasn't easy. What now? New instructions from Brunder. I asked. Lisa shook her head. I looked at the package. I think you might want to go home and try to please our friend, I said with a grin. Lisa smiled widely and reached out to kiss me. I'd love to, she whispered, clutching the bag in her hand. Lisa stood in her nightgown in the bathroom next to our bedroom. She gently wiped the item with a hot cloth. I watched her without making a sound. She turned to me, and seeing my gaze, smiled lightly, continuing to do her task in the silence of the room. I walked closer, and our eyes met. She put away the towel, and taking a deep breath, she said, "Can we just lie down?" Her voice sounded calm, but there was a slight uncertainty in it. I took off my clothes and lay down next to her on the bed. She took the object she was holding and placed it next to her, turning back to me. Sometimes you need to try something new, she said quietly, not taking her eyes off me. Her face expressed deep thought, but not the aggressive determination that it usually did. She leaned forward, and our hands met as if we were both seeking peace in the moment. Would you like to try it? She asked, more jokingly than seriously, and I simply nodded, feeling no pressure, only trust between us. We were alone in a quiet room, and what connected us was much more than words could express. After all this, a heavy silence hung in the air. What we did and what it did to me, John? Lisa asked quietly, stroking my hair and looking at me from the pillow. I nodded. You really liked it? I didn't have to answer. It wasn't a question. She waited a little. Did this make you want to see the video more or less? She asked quietly. I mean, do you want to see them? I'm just asking because Dr. Brunder thinks you'd like it. And she seems to understand you. I started to get aroused again at the thought of the video. And from her question, I felt that she herself would like to have copies of these videos. Who could blame her? Any woman would be glad to have such memories of herself in her intimate prime, with a body as beautiful and photogenic as hers. Do you want me to see them? I asked. Lisa looked at me carefully. Normally I would say no. I'm really afraid that you'll hate me when you see them, she said, brushing away a tear. But if Dr. Brunder believes that this will not destroy us, that this will help, then you know I trust her. But I would like her to watch them first, although I am so ashamed, so that she can decide whether we should watch them or not. But if you don't want to see them, that's fine too. I thought about it. Did I want to pretend that I didn't want to see them? Pretend that I wasn't consumed by them? That I wasn't obsessed with them? I had replayed my own versions of these videos millions of times. I could no longer concentrate on work. She moved her hand down while I was trying to find what exactly is in these videos. I asked with difficulty. She sighed. She knew that it would be easier for me to accept all this if she caressed me while talking, a little sweetness in the bitterness, and she wasn't wrong. I nodded. What's in these videos? I repeated the question. Well, a lot of, fun mostly, she replied. She paused to see my reaction. I guess I became even more excited. She nodded. Tell me, I demanded. Well, different poses, and you know how men are, they're obsessed with, well, lots of close-ups, she said, her voice trailing off. I'm worried because she began, but I interrupted. Maybe I said something dirty? Tears. Damn fake tears. What word did Dr. Brunder use? Performative? I asked. Performative tears, she corrected. How many years does it take for women to master this trick? Tell me what you said. I demanded. She looked at me with her sparkling eyes, feigning sadness. Come on, I'll still hear it, I insisted. Something about how much I liked. How much did you enjoy pleasuring him? I asked. She shrugged. Well, only because he liked it when I said that. But you weren't lying, I added. She shrugged again, her face contorting into a silent cry. Stop crying, I said. You didn't cry when you told him all this. You won't cry on video, right? You enjoyed it. She wiped her tears with my sweater. Tell me what you said. I demanded again. I don't remember exactly, she replied. I don't know what was on the video. I told him how much I liked his body and his... I rolled over onto her, pressing my hips against her chest more. I said, our eyes met. I don't know. Ask me what I didn't say, baby. I had a dirty mouth with him. He liked it when I talked like that. I liked that it turned him on. Okay, I nodded, and she picked up the pace. Did you mention me? I asked. Not too much, she replied. Did you tell him how much bigger he is than mine? I asked. It came up in conversation, she said. I expected her to say something consoling, but she didn't. She just continued to caress me. Well, at least this I thought. After all, I was the one who lay next to her in bed. Have you told him that you like the way he has you better than me? I asked, no longer hiding my anger. You said that, right? I insisted. Don't torture yourself, baby, she said quietly. You spoke, I repeated. I don't remember what was on the video, she replied. You can watch it or not. I nodded. Do you want them? She asked. I nodded more firmly. When it was over, I collapsed next to her again. Dr. Brunder wanted to know right away, she said, wiping between her breasts. I need to write to her now, I asked, throwing the tissues into the trash can next to the bed. Lisa looked at me as she continued to dry herself. Yes, she said. Let her know as soon as it happens. It's already late. If she doesn't want to be disturbed, she'll just turn off the phone. John, we promised to tell her as soon as this happened. Fine. Almost immediately after Lisa sent the message, her phone rang. Lisa sat up. Dr. Brunda? Hello, I hope I'm not. Yeah, just now. Yeah, we were just talking after our first... Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. Yeah, very. Yeah, no, it was really hot for both of us. Lisa turned to smile at me and put her hand on my leg. Yes, that's good. Good to know. Yes, no, we talked later and I will caress him. Yes. Oh yes, definitely. I think... Okay. Okay, you do that. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But that means you... Oh no, it's just... I know, but it's just... I'm ashamed of my behavior. If you end up... Okay. Thank you, okay. Oh, really? Oh, that's no problem, okay. Thanks again, okay, goodbye, Dr. Brunder. Thank you. Lisa ended the call and continued typing something on her phone. What was that? I asked. Who are you writing to? After a few more touches, she threw the phone on the bed, staring at the space in front of her for a moment, and then looked at me with a wide smile. I was waiting for big news, baby, she said. She kissed me, her hair falling on me. Baby, we're going to Lake Epsilon, she said, as if we had just won the Super Bowl and were heading to Disneyland. It took me a little while to process. Wait, what? You mean the place where they make those night toys? What? These? She laughed. Yes, exactly. But I mean, you heard Julian talk about it. It sounds amazing. Just relax on the lake and clear your head from the bustle of the city. God, yes. What is it, baby? I asked. Don't think about it. We need it. We need a change of scenery. For how long? I asked, reaching for her notebook. 2 weeks, starting the 25th of next month, she said, shaking her head. This month, it's Monday. She nodded, her eyes shining with excitement. Lisa. I started, but she put a finger to my lips. Don't start, John. We need it. We can do it. We need to clear our heads, get out of this space. And we can do it. The timing is perfect. We both have vacation time accumulated, and we don't have the money to go somewhere far away. But we don't need to spend anything on this place. You just finish that damn account, and nothing you do now can be transferred to another robot worker. John, please, please, please. You stay out here. What is this place? And how is it that it doesn't cost us anything? You heard Julian. Brunder subsidizes all sorts of things by selling his damn toys. And we'll work while we're there. It's kind of like a hippie commune. You could do carpentry work. They build houses there. You know how to hold a hammer and a saw in your hands. And I can work in a small store or something like that. In the evening, we'll have dinner and drink wine by the lake. It will be incredible, and it costs us nothing. Please. What the hell, Lisa? How did you even know about this place? We only heard about it today. Why do you think we'll like it there? Well, actually, Dolores told me about it a long time ago. Do you remember how he and Dan turned to Care Brunder when they had problems? She wasn't supposed to tell me about it because of the non-disclosure agreement, but I promised her I wouldn't tell you. She said, I know you'll definitely be chosen, and it will be incredible. You remember how they went to Hawaii every second year? Now she says forget about Hawaii. They go to Lake Epsilon every year. But she warned me that it would take several months of therapy before we were allowed there, and it's only been a few weeks. What do you mean we'll be chosen? Lisa shook her head as if she didn't understand the question. I don't know, baby. Because of this subscription, Dolores couldn't tell me the details. I think different couples have different therapy programs, I guess. I don't know. Damn. Do you want me to understand how Dr. Brunder's mind works? She's like some damn ninja. You never know where she's going to strike from. I sighed. I don't know, Lisa, baby. She begged, please. I need to get out of the city, even just to not see my work. She looked at me meaningfully. And some of the people who work there, she added. Crap. I sighed. Yes. I see how she manipulated me. But what could I say? No, Lisa. Let's not take a vacation to get away from your recent ex-lover? Well, no, I'm not going to pose to build a damn intim toy. Lisa giggled and kissed me deeply. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What about the video? I asked. Lisa nodded, remembering. Dr. Brunder will try to get them. What? I looked at her. Dr. Brunder thought it would be difficult because Mark had already told me he had removed them all. She was afraid that if it was played wrong, he'd redouble his efforts and deny he had them, and then we'd never get them. So she said she'd take care of it herself. She texted him from another phone, pretending to be me. I have to be close to the phone in case he gets suspicious and asks a follow-up question to make sure it's really me. She'll call me if this happens, and if she can't get out of it, she'll let you know how it went. God. Lisa shrugged. It's logical. She knows how well you know how to manipulate people. She nodded. Do you think she will succeed or not? She asked, her voice sounding sincere. She looked almost excited, almost worried. Oh my God, Lisa. Do you doubt that Brunder can coax a couple of dirty videos out of a cheap, self-proclaimed suburban macho? I couldn't help myself. Her face showed anger for a moment. Don't push me, she said quietly but firmly. I'm serious. Her phone vibrated and lit up on the bed. She turned away from me to check it. She read the message and then turned the screen towards me. New message from Dr. Brunder. I received them. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you. Go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about clicking.